London, April 1887. The demon exploded in a shower of ichor and guts. William Herondale jerked back the dagger he was holding, but it was too late. The viscid acid of the demon's blood had already begun to eat away at the shining blade. He swore, and tossed the weapon aside. It landed in a filthy puddle and commenced smoldering like a doused match. The demon itself, of course, had vanished, dispatched back to whatever hellish world it had come from, though not without leaving a mess behind. "Jem," Will called, turning around. "Where are you? Did you see that? Killed it with one blow. Not bad, eh?" But there was no answer to Will's shout. His hunting partner had been standing behind him in a damp and crooked street a few moments before, guarding his back. Will was positive, but now Will was alone in the shadows. He frowned in annoyance. It was much less fun showing off without Jem to show off to. He glanced beside him, to where the street narrowed into a passage that gave into the black, heaving water of the Thames in the distance. Through the gap, Will could see the dark outlines of docked ships, a forest of masts like a leafless orchard. No Jem there. Perhaps he'd gone back to Narrow Street and searched for better illumination. With a shrug, Will headed back the way he had come. Narrow Street cut across Limehouse, between the docks beside the river, and the cramped slums spreading west toward Whitechapel. It was as narrow as its name suggested, lined with warehouses and lopsided wooden buildings. At the moment it was deserted. Even the drunk staggering home from the grapes off the road had found somewhere to collapse for the night. Will liked the Limehouse, liked the feeling of being on the edge of the world, where ships left every day for unimaginably far ports, that the area was a sailor's haunt, and consequently full of gambling hells, opium dens, and brothels didn't hurt either. It was easy to lose yourself in a part like this. He didn't even mind the smell of it. Smoke and rope and tar, foreign spices mixed with the dirty river water smell of the Thames. Looking up and down the empty street, he scrubbed the sleeve of his coat across his face, trying to rub away the ichor that stung and burned his skin. The clothes came away stained, black and green. There was a cut on the back of his hand, too, a nasty one. He could use a healing rune, one of Charlotte's preferably. She was particularly good at drawing irises. The shape detached itself from the shadows and moved towards Will. He started forward, then paused. It wasn't Jem, but rather a mundane police, wearing a bell-shaped helmet, a heavy overcoat, and a puzzled expression. He stared at Will, or rather through Will. However accustomed Will had become to glamour, it was always strange to be looked through as if he wasn't there. Will was seized with the sudden urge to grab the policeman's truncheon and watch while the man flopped around trying to figure out where it had gone. But Jem had scolded him the few times he'd done that before, and while Will was never really could understand Jem's objections to the whole enterprise, it wasn't worth making him upset. With a shrug and a blink, the policeman moved past Will, shaking his head and muttering something under his breath about swearing off the Jem before he truly started saying things. Will stepped aside to let the man pass, then raised his voice to a shout. "James Carstairs! Jem, where are you, you disloyal bastard?" This time a faint reply answered him. "Over here. Follow the witch-light." Will moved towards the sound of Jem's voice. It seemed to be coming from a dark opening between two warehouses. A faint gleam was visible within the shadows, like the darting light of the will-o'-the-wisp. "Did you hear me before? That Shax demon thought it could get me with its bloody great pincers, but I cornered it in an alley." "Yes, I heard you." The young man who appeared at the mouth of the alley was pale in the lamplight, paler even than he usually was, which was quite pale indeed. He was bareheaded, which drew the eye immediately to his hair. It was an odd, bright silver color, like an untarnished shilling. His eyes were the same silver, and his fine-boned face was angular. The slight curve of his eyes was the only clue to his heritage. There were dark stains across his white shirt front, and his hands were thickly smeared with red. Will tensed. "You're bleeding. What happened?" Jem waved away Will's concern. "It's not my blood." He turned his head back towards the alley behind him. "It's hers." Will glanced past his friend into the thicker shadows of the alley. In the far corner he of it was a crumpled shape, only a shadow in the darkness, but when Will looked closely, he could make out the shape of a pale hand and a wisp of fair hair. "A dead woman?" Will asked. "A mundane?" "A girl, really, not more than 14. At that Will cursed with great volume and expression. Jem waited patiently for him to be done. "If only we'd happened along a little earlier," Will said finally. "That bloody demon." "That's a particular thing. I don't think this was the demon's work." Jem frowned. "Shack's demons are parasites. Blood parasites. It would have wanted to drag its victim back to its lair to lay eggs in her skin while she was still alive. But this girl, she was stabbed. Repeatedly. And I don't think it was here either. There simply isn't enough blood in the alley. I think she was attacked elsewhere, and she dragged herself here to die of her injuries. But the Shack's demon. I'm telling you, I don't think it was the Shack's. I think the Shack's was pursuing her, hunting her down for something or someone else." "Shackses have a keen sense of smell," Will allowed. "I have heard of warlocks using them to follow the tracks of the missing, and it did seem to be moving with an odd sort of purpose." He looked past Jem at the pitiful smallness of the crumpled shape in the alley. "You didn't find the weapon, did you?" "Here." Jem drew something from the inside of his jacket. "A knife wrapped in white cloth. It's a sort of misery cord, or a hunting dagger. Look how thin the blade is." Will took it. The blade was indeed thin, ending in a handle made of polished bone. The blade and hilt both were stained with dry blood. With a frown he wiped the flat of the knife across the rough fabric of his sleeve, scraping it clean until a symbol burned into the blade became visible. 2 serpents, each biting the other's tail, forming a perfect circle. "Ouroboros," Jem said, leaning in close to stare at the knife. "A double one. Now what do you think that means?" "The end of the world," said Will, still looking at the dagger, a small smile playing at his mouth. "And the beginning." Jem frowned. "I understand the symbology, William. I meant, what do you think its presence on the dagger signifies?" The wind off the river was ruffling Will's hair. He brushed it out of his eyes with an impatient gesture and went back to studying the knife. "It's an alchemical symbol, not a warlock or adult world one. That usually means humans, the foolish mundane sort who think trafficking in magic is a ticket for gaining wealth and fame. The sort who usually end up in a pile of bloody rags and sign some pentagram." Jem sounded grim. "The sort who like to lurk about the downworld parts of our far city." After wrapping the handkerchief around the blade carefully, Will slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Do you think Charlotte will let me handle the investigation?" "Do you think you can be trusted in downworld? The gambling hells, the dens of magic vice, the women of loose morals." Will smiled the way Lucifer might have smiled moments before he fell from heaven. "Would tomorrow be too early to start looking, do you think?" Jem sighed. "Do what you like, William. You always do."